The rain had just begun when David's black Mercedes rolled quietly into the driveway of his massive mansion. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. His flight had landed 3 hours early. He smiled to himself, thinking of surprising his wife, Emily, and hugging his 2 little kids. For once, he wanted to be a husband and father first, not a billionaire always chained to work. As he opened the front door, the house was strangely quiet. No sound of cartoons, no laughter, no running footsteps, only the faint hum of the refrigerator and something else. A woman's sharp voice cut through the silence. "Eat it. You think you're too good for food your mother cooked?" David frowned. That was Emily's voice, cold, irritated, and nothing like the gentle tone she always used when he was home. He followed the sound, his shoes almost silent on the marble floor. As he neared the kitchen, he heard a soft sob. It was his daughter, Sophie, barely 2 years old. He peeked around the corner and froze. Sophie sat on the floor, her face smeared with food and tears, while Emily stood above her, arms crossed, glaring down with disgust. On the floor lay a half-eaten piece of chicken covered in dust. Emily shoved the plate closer with her foot. "You dropped it. You eat it. Right now." Sophie whimpered, her tiny hands trembling as she reached for the dirty food. David's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The world tilted around him. For a moment he thought he was imagining it. But the cruelty in Emily's eyes was real, raw and merciless. He stepped forward, voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "Emily, what are you doing to my daughter?" Emily turned, startled, her face pale, but then she smiled. A slow, chilling smile that made David's blood run cold. For a long second, no one moved. The air between them was heavy, thick with something David couldn't name. Emily blinked once, her smile stiffening, then softened her voice as if nothing had happened. "Oh, honey, you scared me. I was just trying to teach her not to waste food." But Sophie's tear-streaked cheeks told another story. She shrank back, clutching the hem of her small dress, eyes wide with fear. David's chest tightened as he knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" he whispered. Sophie didn't answer. She only looked at Emily as if waiting for permission to speak. That single glance broke him. Emily crouched beside them, her tone sugary sweet. "She's just being dramatic. Kids cry all the time." She brushed Sophie's hair roughly. "Don't they, sweetheart?" Sophie flinched. David saw it clearly, the way she recoiled from her stepmother's touch. His mind raced back to the day he married Emily. She had seemed kind, patient, someone who could bring warmth back into their broken home. But now, watching her tower over a crying child, he realized how blind love had made him. "Emily," he said slowly, voice shaking, "you don't yell at a baby. You don't make her eat off the floor." Emily straightened, arms crossed. "Maybe if you were home more often, you'd understand discipline." Her words hit him like a slap. He stood frozen, torn between fury and disbelief. Sophie's small hand gripped his sleeve, trembling. The silence grew unbearable. Emily's gaze hardened, her mask slipping for just a moment, long enough for David to see the irritation, the disgust hiding beneath her perfect smile. Then, with a forced laugh, she said, "You really don't think I'd hurt your daughter, do you?" David didn't answer. He just stared at her, realizing for the first time he might not know the woman he married at all. That night, the mansion felt colder than ever. The chandeliers still shimmered, the marble floors still gleamed, but to David, everything looked different. Emptier, almost cruel. He walked through the long hallway where family photos hung, smiling faces, perfect poses. In one, Emily held Sophie in her arms, grinning brightly. Now that smile looked fake. He stopped outside Sophie's nursery. Through the cracked door, he saw her curled up in bed, clutching a stuffed bear with one missing eye. Her little chest rose and fell with soft sobs she tried to hide. David's throat tightened. He stepped inside, quietly, kneeling beside her. "Daddy," she whispered. "Yes, baby, I'm here," he said, brushing her hair back gently. "You're safe now." But when he said it, even he didn't believe it. Downstairs, Emily sat in the living room, swirling a glass of red wine, her reflection gleaming in the massive window. She looked like the perfect wife, the kind people envied. No one would ever imagine what happened behind closed doors. David watched her from the stairs. How many times had she smiled at him like that, hiding the cruelty he'd just seen? He thought of his late wife, Grace, the way she used to hum lullabies in that same kitchen, the way Sophie giggled when she cooked. That warmth was gone. He returned to Sophie's room and sat by her bed until she drifted off. Outside, thunder rumbled. He promised himself he would find the truth, no matter what it cost. Downstairs, Emily's phone buzzed. A message popped up from an unknown number. "He saw something tonight. Be careful." Emily's eyes darkened. She took a deep sip of wine and whispered to herself, "I won't let him ruin this." At that exact moment, David decided he would install new cameras in the house, without telling anyone, not even Emily. The next morning, sunlight filled the mansion, but the tension was sharp enough to cut through glass. Emily hummed softly as she prepared breakfast, acting as if nothing had happened. David sat at the table, pretending to read emails on his tablet. Across from him, Sophie picked at her cereal silently. Every time Emily moved closer, the little girl's shoulders stiffened. David noticed. He noticed everything now. "Did you sleep well, sweetheart?" he asked Sophie gently. She nodded quickly without looking up. Emily smiled too sweetly. "She's just shy this morning. Aren't you, darling?" David forced a smile back, but his mind was miles away. He had installed the new cameras last night. Tiny, hidden, impossible to detect. He needed proof before confronting Emily again. Later that day, he drove to work but couldn't focus. Every image of Sophie's frightened eyes haunted him. He replayed the scene over and over until he realized something else. Emily had seemed angry, not frustrated. There was hatred in her face that didn't belong there. Why? That evening, David returned home early again. He found Emily in the garden, on the phone, whispering harshly, "No, I told you he suspects something. Just let me handle it." When she noticed him, she quickly hung up, flashing a fake smile. "Oh, I was ordering flowers for the dinner party next week." David nodded, pretending to believe her, but inside his suspicion burned hotter. He went to check on Sophie, who was sitting quietly in her room, drawing with broken crayons. The picture on her paper made his heart stop. It showed a tall woman yelling and a small child crying on the floor. "Sophie," he whispered, voice trembling, "who's this?" She looked up, eyes wide and honest. "That's Mommy Grace, and that's the mean lady." David felt his blood run cold. Sophie's drawing wasn't just a picture, it was a memory, one he was about to uncover completely. 2 days later, the house sparkled with lights and laughter. Emily had organized a small brunch with her wealthy friends, ladies dressed in pearls and designer dresses, sipping champagne, pretending life was perfect. David stayed quiet at the end of the long dining table, watching. Every smile from Emily looked rehearsed, every laugh forced. Sophie sat beside him, wearing a pretty blue dress Emily had picked out, but her little fingers twisted nervously in her lap. David placed his hand on hers under the table. She looked up at him, eyes full of silent fear. "Emily," one of the women said, "you're such a natural mother. The children must adore you." Emily's red lips curved into a flawless grin. "Of course they do. I treat them like my own." David's jaw tightened. The lie burned in his ears. But before he could speak, a loud crash came from the kitchen. The guest turned as Sophie's small voice called out, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Emily's smile vanished. She stood, heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, and stormed into the kitchen. David followed quietly. Sophie stood beside the counter, milk spilled all over the floor. Emily's eyes were pure fury. "You stupid little brat," she hissed, gripping Sophie's arm. "You can't do anything right." "Emily," David shouted. But Emily didn't stop. "You think you can embarrass me in front of everyone? Clean it up right now." Sophie whimpered, her tiny body shaking. David grabbed Emily's wrist and pulled her back. "That's enough!" Her expression shifted instantly, realizing the guests could see them through the glass door. She forced a laugh. "Oh, darling, it's fine. Kids make messes." David looked at the horrified guests staring in from the dining room. The truth was out now, at least partially. Emily turned to him with venom in her eyes and whispered so only he could hear, "If you ruin this for me, you'll regret it." That night, the mansion no longer felt like a home. It felt like a stage built on lies. The laughter from the brunch had faded, replaced by a silence that pressed against the walls. David sat alone in his study, staring at the security footage from the new cameras he had installed days earlier. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked through each file. At first, everything looked normal. Emily smiling, the children playing, the routine of a perfect household. But then a clip stopped him cold. Emily stood in the kitchen, towering over Sophie. Her voice was sharp, cruel. "You think crying will save you? Eat it," she hissed, shoving a plate toward the floor. Sophie whimpered softly, whispering, "Please, I'm sorry." David's chest tightened. He couldn't look away. This wasn't a mistake. This was abuse, deliberate, cold, hidden behind his absence and her perfect smile. He watched hours of footage. Emily snatching toys away, mocking the little girl, locking her in her room. Every second shredded the illusion he had built around their family. The woman he thought he loved was a stranger hurting the people he loved most. His phone buzzed. A text from Emily, "Dinner's ready, don't be late." David looked at the screen, fury boiling beneath his calm exterior. He deleted the message and stared into the flickering monitor. His reflection stared back, tired, broken, and awake for the first time in years. Downstairs, Emily called again, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. "David, honey?" He stood, shutting off the monitor, his decision made. He would gather every piece of evidence, protect his children, and expose her for who she really was. But as he opened the study door, he froze. Emily was standing there, her smile sharp as glass. "Working late again?" she asked softly. David swallowed hard, realizing she might already know what he'd found. And this time, she wouldn't hide her darkness anymore. David's pulse pounded in his ears as Emily stepped into the study, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. The faint smell of her perfume filled the air, sweet but suffocating. She tilted her head, eyes glinting like glass. "You've been acting strange, David. Sneaking around, installing cameras. What are you looking for?" He forced a calm smile. "Proof." Her expression flickered. "Proof of what?" He took a deep breath, opening the laptop on his desk. The paused video appeared on screen. Emily towering over Sophie, shouting. The sound of the child's sobs echoed faintly in the room. Emily froze. For the first time, the mask slipped completely. "You went through my private life? My home?" "This is our home," David said coldly, "and you hurt my daughter in it." She laughed bitterly, voice rising. "Your daughter? I sacrificed everything for you, your name, your money, your perfect family image. Do you think anyone cares about that little brat?" David's hand slammed the desk. "Don't you ever call her that again." Emily's face twisted with rage. "You'd throw me away over a child who isn't even mine?" David stepped closer, voice low and shaking. "Yes, because she's innocent, because she deserves better than you." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the quiet ticking of the clock filled the space. Then Emily's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this, David. You'll lose everything." He met her gaze without flinching. "Then I'll lose it with my conscience clean." She turned sharply, her heels clicking as she stormed toward the door, but stopped when David's voice cut through the air. "I've already sent the footage to my lawyer and the police." Emily froze mid-step. Her shoulders stiffened, and for the first time, fear flickered across her perfect face. Without turning back, she whispered, "You think this is over?" But deep down, both of them knew it had only just begun. The house was silent after their confrontation, but the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the calm before a storm. David sat alone in the dark study, staring at the folder on his desk labeled Evidence. The videos, the screenshots, the reports from the maid. It was all there. Enough to destroy Emily's perfect facade, yet a strange ache lingered in his chest. How had his life come to this? Upstairs, he heard faint footsteps. Emily was still awake. He could imagine her pacing, planning, seething. Her pride wouldn't allow her to go down quietly. He knew that much. When he finally stepped out into the hallway, the lights flickered. A storm had rolled in, wind howling through the tall windows. He paused outside Sophie's room to make sure she was asleep. The little girl clutched her bear, her face peaceful for once. That sight gave him strength. He turned to head downstairs, but froze. Emily stood at the end of the hallway, her white nightgown glowing faintly in the dim light. Her expression was unreadable. "David," she said softly, voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt her." He stayed still, his jaw tight. "You had plenty of chances to stop." Tears welled in her eyes, but he saw through them. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I grew up like her. Scared, unwanted. I thought being strict would make her strong." David shook his head. "What you call strength is fear, and I won't let you teach my children that." For a long moment, Emily just stared at him. Then her face hardened. "If you take them from me, I'll make sure you regret it. You'll lose everything, your reputation, your company, your precious image." David stepped closer, his voice calm but cold. "You already destroyed everything that mattered." Lightning flashed outside, and for a brief second, David saw it. The hatred in her eyes twisting into something darker. He realized then Emily wasn't planning to leave quietly. She was planning revenge. By the next morning, David had made up his mind. There would be no more hesitation, no more hoping Emily would change. He called his sister, Claire, the only person he trusted completely. "Take the kids for a few days," he said quietly. "Tell them it's a little vacation. Don't mention Emily." Claire hesitated. "David, what's going on?" "I'll explain later," he replied, his voice low. "Just keep them safe." After the call, David packed Sophie's clothes and her brother's toys into small bags, trying to hide the urgency behind a forced smile. When Emily appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, he froze. "Going somewhere?" she asked sweetly, but her eyes were sharp as knives. "Just sending the kids to Claire's," he said calmly. "She misses them." Emily tilted her head. "How thoughtful." Her tone dripped with sarcasm, but she didn't stop him. She just watched, too calmly. That scared him more than her anger ever had. When the car pulled away with the children inside, David finally exhaled. The house, for the first time, felt like enemy territory. Every picture frame, every hallway held ghosts of the life he thought he had. He began copying files, securing evidence, and reaching out to his lawyer. But deep down, he knew exposing Emily wasn't just about the truth. It was about protecting what little innocence his children had left. That night, Emily cooked dinner as if nothing was wrong. She laughed, poured wine, and played the role of a loving wife with eerie perfection. David joined her, pretending to eat, pretending to smile. It was a dangerous performance, and both of them knew it. When she leaned across the table and whispered, "You think you've won, don't you?" He simply replied, "I think it's almost over." Emily's smile vanished. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You really believe you can take everything from me and walk away alive?" 3 days later, David hosted his company's annual charity gala at the Grand Imperial Hotel. It was the event of the year. Journalists, investors, and socialites filled the ballroom, sipping champagne beneath chandeliers that sparkled like falling stars. Emily, dressed in a silver gown that shimmered with every step, played her part flawlessly. She smiled, laughed, touched David's arm lovingly, the image of a perfect wife. No one would guess the truth that burned beneath the glitter. David stood on stage, giving his usual speech about hope, family, and giving back. But tonight, his words carried a different weight. As he looked out over the crowd, his gaze found Emily. She was standing beside the table, hand resting lightly on a glass of wine, smiling that same practiced smile. He took a breath. The moment had come. "Before we continue," he said, his voice steady but cold, "I want to share something personal. Something that reminds us why integrity matters." A technician in the back pressed a button. The ballroom lights dimmed. A large screen behind David flickered to life. At first, people saw home footage. Emily laughing, Sophie playing, a picture-perfect family. Then the tone shifted. The next clip showed Emily's true face, shouting, shoving, forcing Sophie to eat from the floor. The room fell silent. Gasps rippled through the crowd like thunder. Emily froze, color draining from her face. "David," she hissed, stepping forward. "Turn it off right now!" But David didn't move. "The world deserves to see the truth," he said quietly. The footage ended with Sophie crying, whispering, "Please, Mommy, I'll be good." No one clapped, no one spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the projector. Emily's hands shook. Her perfect smile was gone. She turned toward the crowd, every camera flashing, every pair of eyes on her. And in that suffocating silence, Emily realized her empire of lies had just collapsed. Leffe, in front of everyone who once adored her. The room erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed like lightning, and Emily stood frozen at the center of it all. Her carefully built mask shattered into pieces. The whispers grew louder. Is that really her? Did she hurt his child? I can't believe it. David remained on stage, silent. His hands trembled slightly, but his expression was calm, almost sorrowful. He hadn't wanted revenge. He'd wanted the truth. And now that it was out, it felt heavier than he had imagined. Emily turned toward him, her voice shaking. "You humiliated me," she hissed through clenched teeth. "In front of everyone." David met her gaze. "You humiliated yourself." Security gently escorted her away from the stage as journalists swarmed forward. Cameras caught every tear that rolled down her flawless makeup. She tried to speak, to explain, but every word came out broken, drowned in the storm she had created. Outside the ballroom, the cold night air hit her like a slap. Paparazzi surrounded her instantly, blinding flashes igniting the darkness. "Mrs. West, is it true? Did you abuse his daughter? Are you losing custody?" Emily pushed past them, her heels clattering against the pavement. She reached her car, slamming the door, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. For the first time, there was no one to perform for, no one left to believe the lie. Back inside, David stood alone in the now empty ballroom. The crowd had dispersed, leaving behind scattered glasses and silence. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all. The betrayal, the exposure, the pain his children had endured. But somewhere deep inside, a sense of peace began to grow. The truth was out. The nightmare was ending. Meanwhile, on a dark road far from the city, Emily drove aimlessly, tears streaming down her face. Her phone buzzed with unread messages, missed calls, headlines spreading faster than she could breathe. She screamed into the empty night, realizing too late that the one thing she had destroyed wasn't David's reputation. It was her own soul. The morning after the gala, headlines flooded every screen in the city. Billionaire's wife exposed for child abuse. Emily West's perfect life crumbles overnight. The story went viral within hours. Every news anchor, every gossip site, every social feed repeated her name with disgust. David sat in his office, staring at the screen. His phone buzzed nonstop, calls from reporters, business partners, even friends asking for statements. But he ignored them all. He wasn't thinking about his company or his reputation. His mind was on Sophie and her brother, safe at Claire's house. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to breathe. At that same moment, miles away, Emily sat alone in a motel room. The silver gown from last night lay crumpled on the floor, stained with tears and makeup. Her reflection in the cracked mirror barely looked human, eyes hollow, lips trembling. She'd lost everything, her home, her status, her marriage. She turned on the television and saw her own face flashing across the screen. The video from the gala played again, over and over. Sophie's little voice echoed in the background. "Please, Mommy, I'll be good." Emily covered her ears, sobbing. But behind her tears, something darker stirred. She picked up her phone, scrolling through the endless hate messages and threats. Then she saw a text from an unknown number. "You can still make them pay. Don't let him win." Her breath hitched. "Who are you?" she whispered, but there was no reply. Back at the mansion, David walked through the now empty halls. Every trace of Emily had been removed. The photos, the perfumes, the polished perfection. He stopped in Sophie's room, touching the tiny drawings on the wall. "It's over," he murmured. "You're safe now." But as thunder rolled in the distance, David couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over, that somewhere Emily was still watching. And far away, in that dim motel room, Emily looked up from her phone and whispered, "You think you can erase me, David? You have no idea what's coming." Weeks passed. The scandal slowly began to fade from the headlines, replaced by fresher stories and new gossip. But for David, the damage lingered. His focus now wasn't the business or the whispers, it was his children. They had been through too much, seen too much. It was time to rebuild what Emily had broken. He moved them to a quiet house by the coast, away from the noise and the flashing cameras. The ocean air felt cleaner, softer. Every morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. The same kind of kitchen that once held pain, now filled with laughter again. Sophie at first remained withdrawn. She clung to her brother, rarely speaking, flinching whenever someone raised their voice. David didn't rush her. He just stayed close, reading bedtime stories, making pancakes that were always a little too burnt, letting her know she could trust again. One evening, while making dinner, David burned his hand on a hot pan and yelped in surprise. Sophie looked up from her coloring book and giggled, a small, pure sound that made him freeze. He turned toward her, smiling. "You laughed," he said softly. She nodded shyly. "You sound funny when you get hurt." David laughed too, tears filling his eyes. It was the first time in months he'd heard her laugh. That simple moment felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. At night, as he tucked her into bed, Sophie whispered, "Daddy, will she come back?" He hesitated, brushing her hair. "No, sweetheart, she's gone, and I won't let anyone hurt you again." Sophie nodded and hugged her teddy bear. "I believe you." David kissed her forehead, turning off the light. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, peace filled the room. Outside, waves crashed gently against the shore, a quiet rhythm of healing. But far away, in a small apartment across the city, Emily scrolled through photos of David and the children online, her eyes cold, her smile slowly returning. Months slipped by and winter crept into the city. Emily had vanished from the public eye completely. The once famous socialite now lived in a small, damp apartment on the edge of town. The walls were thin, the lights flickered, and the silence was deafening. Every morning she woke to the same thought: how fast everything had been taken from her. She tried to find work, but no one would hire her. Every interview ended the same way: the manager recognizing her name, the uneasy smile, the polite refusal. "We'll call you." They never did. Her reflection in the mirror no longer resembled the glamorous woman she had once been. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her voice had lost its sharpness. For the first time, Emily began to see the truth. Not just what she had lost, but what she had done. One cold evening, she wandered aimlessly through the streets and stopped outside a small community center. Through the fogged glass, she saw volunteers serving food to homeless families. Something inside her pulled her in. She hesitated, then entered. A woman with kind eyes handed her a bowl of soup and smiled. "First time here?" Emily nodded, unable to speak. As she sat down, she noticed a little girl at a nearby table. Dirty clothes, thin arms, holding a stuffed toy missing an ear. The girl looked up and smiled at her. "Hi." Emily froze. The child's eyes reminded her of Sophie's, innocent, frightened, and forgiving all at once. Tears blurred her vision. After the meal, Emily found herself asking the volunteer if she could help. "We always need hands," the woman said gently. "Come tomorrow." That night, Emily lay awake for hours. For the first time in years, she didn't feel hatred. She felt remorse. Deep, painful remorse. As dawn broke through her cracked window, Emily whispered to herself, Maybe I can still make something right." Spring came quietly. The world seemed softer now, gentler even for someone as broken as Emily. She had started volunteering at the community center every morning, helping serve meals and reading to children. The people there didn't know who she was, and for the first time she didn't lead with her name. She was just Emily. Tired, humbled, but trying. Yet every time she saw a child laugh, she felt a knife twist in her heart. She couldn't escape Sophie's face, her terrified eyes, her tiny, trembling hands. The guilt didn't fade. It grew heavier each day until she could barely breathe beneath it. One evening, after closing the center, Emily sat alone at a wooden table with a blank piece of paper. She stared at it for a long time before picking up the pen. Her hands shook as she began to write. "David, I know you'll never want to hear from me again. You shouldn't. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I remember everything. Every scream, every tear. I see them when I close my eyes. I wish I could take it back." Her writing blurred through her tears, but she continued. "I wasn't born cruel. I was raised in fear. My mother was like me, angry, broken, unforgiving. I thought control was love. I thought pain was discipline. I didn't understand kindness until I saw what it looked like on your face, and I destroyed it." She folded the letter carefully and sealed it in an envelope with David's name. No return address, no signature, just the truth. The next morning, she mailed it. Days later, David received it at the Coastal House. He read it silently, every word slicing deep, yet strangely healing. He didn't feel anger this time, only sorrow for the woman she could have been. He folded the letter, placed it in a drawer beside a photo of Sophie, and whispered, "Maybe this is her first honest act." And as waves crashed outside, David felt something he hadn't in years, a quiet sense of closure beginning to take root. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. The sky was bright, the air smelled like rain, and David had taken Sophie and her brother to the city for a doctor's appointment. They hadn't been back in months. Too many memories lingered in every corner. But now Sophie was stronger, braver. She even hummed quietly in the back seat, her little hand clutching her teddy bear. After the appointment, they stopped by a small bakery near the hospital. Sophie loved the smell of fresh bread. David ordered her favorite, chocolate croissants, and as he waited at the counter, a soft voice from behind made his heart freeze. "David?" He turned slowly. Standing a few feet away was Emily. She looked nothing like the woman he once knew. Her hair was tied back simply, her face bare, her clothes plain. She was thinner, paler, but her eyes, those once cold and sharp eyes, were different. Softer, tired, human. For a moment, neither spoke. The world seemed to pause between them. Sophie peeked out from behind David, recognizing her instantly but staying quiet. Emily's lips trembled. She's grown," she whispered. David nodded slowly. "She's healing." Emily lowered her gaze. "I sent a letter. I didn't know if you'd read it." "I did," he said quietly, "and I believe you meant it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to see her one last time, to know she's okay." David hesitated, torn between anger and pity. He glanced at Sophie, who looked up at him, then at Emily. The child's voice was small but steady. "Hi," she said softly. Emily broke down, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, unable to stop shaking. The bakery was silent. No one moved. David finally spoke. "You've seen her now, Emily. Maybe that's enough." But as Emily nodded, whispering, "Thank you," David realized something inside him had shifted. Not forgiveness yet, but the beginning of it. The encounter at the bakery lingered in David's mind for days. He couldn't forget the way Emily's voice shook, or how Sophie's tiny hi seemed to melt years of bitterness in one small sound. That night, after putting the children to bed, he sat on the porch, listening to the waves and replaying the moment again and again. For so long, he had hated her, hated what she'd done, hated the darkness she'd brought into their lives. But seeing her so broken, stripped of pride and pretense, something inside him began to soften. It wasn't forgiveness yet, it was the faint ache of understanding. The next morning, Sophie wandered into his room, holding her teddy bear. "Daddy," she said, "is she still bad?" David paused, then lifted her onto his lap. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "She made terrible mistakes, but people can change when they really want to." Sophie thought for a moment. "She cried when she saw me." "Yes," he whispered, his throat tight, "because she's sorry." Sophie nodded slowly. "Then I'm not mad anymore." Those simple words struck deeper than anything David could have said. The innocence of a child had done what years of pain couldn't. It released the anger. Later that week, a letter arrived from Emily again, this time short and handwritten. "Thank you for letting me see her. You don't owe me anything. I'm volunteering at the center full-time now. I'm trying to be useful, not forgiven. I just wanted you to know I'm keeping my promise, to be better." David folded the letter and smiled faintly. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. That evening, as Sophie painted by the window, she turned to him and said, "Daddy, can we send her a picture?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, I think she'd like that." And as the sun dipped below the ocean, David realized forgiveness wasn't something you gave. It was something you grew into, one small act of kindness at a time. Months passed, and life began to find its rhythm again. The coastal air seemed to wash away what remained of the past. David's company recovered, the children laughed more often, and the house finally felt like a home again. Yet sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, David would think of Emily, not with hatred, but with a strange, gentle sadness. In the city, Emily's life had taken a new turn. She worked full-time at the community center now, helping children who came from broken homes. The first few weeks were unbearable. Each child's story mirrored her own failures. But over time, something changed. When she read to them, when she bandaged scraped knees or listened to their fears, she began to understand what real care meant. One afternoon, a little girl at the shelter drew her a picture, a stick-figure woman holding a child's hand under a sky full of hearts. "That's you and me," the girl said proudly. Emily smiled through tears. For the first time in years, she felt worthy of smiling back. That night, as she closed up the center, a small envelope slipped under the door. No name, no note, just a drawing inside. It was Sophie's picture, a house by the sea, a family standing together, and in the corner, a woman waving with the words, "Thank you." Emily's breath caught. She sank to the floor, clutching the paper to her chest. Somehow, David must have sent it. Somehow, they knew she was trying. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of guilt. They were of release. For the first time, she didn't feel trapped in her past. As dawn broke, Emily whispered to herself, "Maybe forgiveness isn't given to us. Maybe it's something we earn, one act of love at a time." Years passed quietly, soft as the waves that brushed the shore outside their window. Sophie was 10 now, taller, stronger, her laughter ringing through the house like music. Her brother had grown into a kind young boy, gentle and protective. The home that had once been a place of fear was now filled with warmth, the air scented with pancakes and sea breeze instead of tension. David had changed too. The lines on his face carried stories of pain and survival, but also peace. Every morning he brewed coffee, watched his children eat breakfast, and silently thanked the universe for giving them another chance. The chaos was gone, replaced by steady calm. On Sophie's 10th birthday, she found an old photo album on the bookshelf. It held memories of her mother, Grace, and even one or two of Emily, photos David had never managed to throw away. She brought the album to her father, her small fingers tracing the faces. "Daddy," she said softly, "was she really bad?" David looked at the picture for a long moment before answering. "She was lost, sweetheart. People do terrible things when they're lost." Sophie tilted her head. "Do you think she's found now?" He smiled faintly. "I think she's trying." That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson. Sophie leaned her head against her father's shoulder. "Mommy Grace used to sing to me, right?" "Yes," David whispered, "and when you laugh, you sound just like her." Sophie giggled. "Then I'll keep laughing so she can hear me." He wrapped an arm around her, his eyes misting. Inside, the photo album lay open on the table. Past and present, side by side, pain and healing sharing the same page. As the sun dipped below the horizon, David realized that peace wasn't about forgetting. It was about living without fear, knowing love had finally taken root where pain once lived. It was a bright Sunday morning, the kind that smelled of sunlight and new beginnings. The kitchen was filled with the sound of sizzling butter and Sophie's laughter as she stood on a stool, helping her father flip pancakes. She wore a little apron that read, "Chef in Training," her hair tied back with a yellow ribbon. David smiled as he watched her carefully pour the batter. "Perfect," he said proudly. "You're getting better every week." Sophie grinned. "Because you're a good teacher, Daddy." The moment was simple, ordinary, but to David it felt sacred. This was the same kitchen where years ago his heart had shattered, where cruelty had once lived. Now it was full of light, the ghosts replaced by joy. After breakfast, Sophie ran outside to play with her brother, their laughter echoing through the yard. David began washing the dishes, humming softly. Through the window, he saw something that made him pause. Across the street, near the edge of the garden, stood a familiar figure. Emily. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, wearing a plain cardigan. She didn't move closer, just watched quietly, her eyes soft, almost peaceful. When David met her gaze, she gave a small nod, as if saying thank you without words. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. There was no anger left, no pain, only understanding. Sophie came running back, holding a flower she had picked. "Daddy, look!" David turned back to her, smiling. "Beautiful, sweetheart." When he looked outside again, Emily was gone. Only the faint sound of waves and birds remained. He glanced around the kitchen once more. It was filled with life again. Warmth, hope, and the quiet beauty of forgiveness. He whispered to himself, "We made it." As sunlight spilled across the counter, the past finally rested, and the kitchen that once witnessed pain now stood as proof that love, real love, can rebuild even the most broken places. So now, it's easy, and that's how the story ends, my friends. You're still here, aren't you? If you've made it this far, it's because something in this story has touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you that pain doesn't have to define us, that even the darkest chapters can lead to light if we dare to forgive ourselves and others. This story isn't just about David, Sophie, or Emily. It's about all of us, about losing our way, breaking, and somehow finding the courage to rebuild. The Stoics used to say, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Every wound, every betrayal, every heartbreak can become the path towards something purer, stronger, more human. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about transforming the pain into wisdom. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Choose compassion, choose understanding. That's where peace begins. If this story stirred something inside you, take a moment. Like, share, and subscribe. Not for numbers, but so more people can be reminded that redemption is real, that kindness still matters, and that it's never too late to start again. So tell me, friend, what color is your heart today?